All right, let's turn to, again, looking at some of these candidates a little deeper down the Heisman boards, but ones that do bear looking at in this segment of Heisman Watch. And we will, look, we've seen some of these running backs move up the board. We're seeing one of these guys we're going to talk about currently in play right now. I want to get your thoughts, though, on Desmond Ridder, the Cincinnati quarterback, though, Wes. That's where we'll start this segment of Heisman Watch. He's seen his odds come as short as 15-1, at least in some of the shops, but now back up to 20-1. Despite really good numbers this year, it has been a relative struggle today for him and the Cincinnati Bearcats as a whole. Right now, Wes, just 12 of 21, 141 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. For a guy who, as you mentioned this earlier, like the only case he has is if his team goes undefeated. Mm-hmm. The pressure ratchets up every week. The lines have gotten higher on Cincinnati every week. How have you kind of analyzed his game as we've seen his stock really rise now over the last few weeks?
Well, and honestly, it hasn't risen that much over the last couple because it's been pretty stagnant at 20-1. We sat here last Saturday. It was 20-1. Not really seeing much of a switch because Desmond Ridder really does not put up huge numbers. And his only saving grace, though, is if this team is undefeated, that maybe his ceiling is going to be that he could be a finalist. And we're going to have Dave Miller at the back end of this program here, and he is a Heisman voter. So, we've been talking to a couple other different people, a couple other different experts, Pete Futak, Matt Hayes, and the like, that are voters for the Heisman Trophy Award. And Ridder, it almost seems like, okay, if his team's undefeated and Cincinnati's in that mix for the playoff, that he's going to get an invite and a free trip to New York, but does he really have enough to win the award? And that's kind of what concerns you about that, and you really haven't seen a big adjustment in the price. 20-1, I think, early in the season he was in the 30s and the 40s, so there's been a little adjustment, but there hasn't been that second adjustment like you've seen with the Matt Corral, like you've seen with perhaps even C.J. Stroud, although he was a little bit shorter to start the season. So people just aren't getting there with Desmond Ridder just yet. And I mean, just by the nature of being there, I guess, 20-1, that would look like kind of an impressive price where it's like, okay, there's value here, but that's really where he should be, is 20-1, because he just doesn't have those numbers that Young or Corral or C.J. Stroud. I mean, this Ohio State team that if they're kind of have an off day offensively, is still going to score around 40 points. So Cincinnati really doesn't have that, and plus, obviously, the quality of competition is going to be taken into consideration. The only ranked team left on Cincinnati's schedule is going to be SMU. And by the way, Navy does go for it on 4th and 4. UC gets a stop. 9:06 left to go. We're still where we started at the half. 13-10 Cincinnati.
And you think about, too, it's a really interesting point as well, because you have some of these guys that, and there's a reason why the odds are what they are. One is, all right, guy on an undefeated team, but the numbers don't totally wow you in the case of Desmond Ridder for Cincinnati. But how about a guy like Bijan Robinson, who's another guy at 20-1? Stats are amazing. Mm-hmm. Media hype, you could make the argument, maybe a little overblown in the media hype this season, Wes. And partly it's Texas. It's a big time school that the media loves to talk about. But at the same time, that's a team that has struggled and is on a bye this week. But it's kind of funny how you have two guys at 20-1. The resumes could not be more polar opposites. One guy who's putting up great numbers on a pretty mediocre team, another guy who's leading a really good team, but the numbers don't exactly back it up in Ridder. So I'm curious to think, where do you think Robinson's odds end up going, especially now that Texas is really out of any conversation for a top bowl or any sort of playoff consideration?
I certainly don't see him dropping here because, look, they're going to get they still get Baylor, Iowa State, Kansas, West Virginia, Kansas State. As of right now, only one ranked team on that schedule, that being Baylor. Iowa State certainly will change that today if they go ahead and beat an undefeated Oklahoma State team. But I don't think I could get there with Robinson when you have other running backs. If you're going to look at a running back, when you have not only Kenneth Walker, we talked about, even though I think he should be a little higher than 14-1, Kenneth Walker is going to get to play against Michigan, is going to get to play against Ohio State, is going to get to play against Penn State. So he still has a chance in some high showcase games, as long as Michigan State is still undefeated or within one loss, that they're going to have a lot of eyeballs on those games. You also have Travion Henderson from Ohio State at 40-1. One of the reasons why he hasn't gone down is because, it's kind of a guilt of being on such a great team like Ohio State
Right.
because they have so many weapons. And that might be what penalizes CJ Stroud a little bit, where it kind of falls into that Mac Jones at Alabama syndrome last year. It's like, oh my God, he's got all these pros, all these NFL draft choices at receiver. This is an easy offense to run. These guys are like wide open every play, like CJ Stroud has Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and you also have the backup running back, Master Teague. So Henderson is kind of in that where Ohio State is just so damn loaded offensively that it's almost like you're splitting votes if you have multiple offensive players from one team. I kind of think Devontae Smith got a little bit of the benefit of the doubt last year because he had such a great season. Jalen Waddle went down with that ankle injury. So voters were willing to kind of, skirt a little bit because maybe they underappreciated Mac Jones because Tua ran this offense, this offense just easy to run. And because Mac Jones was like a 3-star kid and wasn't really as highly touted of a recruit as like a Tua or Jalen Hurts or somebody like that. So that obviously, I think, plays into the individual voter bias for this award.
Yeah, it's like 40-1. Don't bother. I would say at that point, that far down the board.